In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. So today we hear this parable about the kingdom of heaven being compared to the wedding feast of a son. And the kingdom of heaven, we hear many times, is the great banquet, the eternal celebration in the kingdom of heaven, the joy of being in God's presence. But we hear this gospel reading today which speaks about sending out invitations. And the invitations were denied by the recipients of the invitations. We hear that some of them went to their farm, some of them went to their business, some of them abused the deliverers of the message, the one who was inviting them. Now, what does this mean? This references specifically the prophets of the Old Testament, the prophets who came and spoke and called those to follow God, and they chose not to. Now, the key of the refusal of these invitations is not because they were unable, it's because they were unwilling. And I think that's a huge defining factor in understanding this gospel, is that it wasn't that the people who were invited had to go to their business, had to go to their farm, had to do other things, but they chose to. And I think that is what we see today in society, that people make choices and say that those choices are necessities when they are not. But we see this gospel come to life in the fact that it's the additional invitations that we see in the history of the Old Testament, where the prophets kept coming and speaking, and they kept being persecuted and chased out, and some even martyred for their message of calling the world to God. And then we see that Christ himself comes to deliver that message, which we know what happened to Christ by the hands of the chosen people. He was betrayed, he was crucified, and died and rose. But there's one thing in this gospel reading that we hear and we say almost every Sunday. Hopefully you say it every Sunday if you're here. And it's, how shall I, who am unworthy, enter into the splendor of your bridal chamber? Right? Remember that prayer that we read before communion? And not having a wedding garment, I shall be cast out. And we hear this prayer come to life in this gospel. This is where that prayer came from. So we hear this gospel reading about this man who's in the kingdom of heaven. He's invited. He's the last of the last to be invited. So the king says, go out and just invite anybody, the good, the bad, have them come in, and we'll work with them. We'll fill the banquet. And then we see that there's one man in there that is not wearing a bridal garment. Now, a bridal garment in the church, that's what this represents. In fact, one of the altar boys asked me this morning, why do we have to wear these long robes? And I said, because this robe under here, the stikadion, is the one that falls down, is the bridal robe that covers our sinfulness. As clergy, our sinfulness as chanters or altar boys or as deacons, that clothes us with this garment of righteousness that is God's. But this man is inside, and you think, if he got invited off the street, if he didn't know anything, how does this man have a bridal garment, and why is he accused of not having one? Right? I mean, if he's just invited, if somebody came to you and said, hey, I want you to come to my black tie event tonight, and I pull you off the street, you're just cutting your grass, you get in this limousine, I take you to the event, and then you're inside and you say, I don't have a tuxedo, and then I say, well, now you're out because you don't have a tuxedo. It makes us ask some questions. Where do you get the tuxedo, right? But the thing is, in the early days of the wedding feast that lasted many days, people were given a bridal garment. So as you came in, the host or the steward of the feast would say, here, you put this on. If you've ever been to a monastery or a convent and you've gone in with improper clothing, for those who have gone, especially for women, you have to have your skin covered, right? Skin covered, long dress, your hair has to be underneath what do they call it, a bushka or wear a scarf, whatever, to cover your head so that there's no skin showing. But you're given that in the monastery. In fact, when I was in Cyprus, they had an entire wardrobe rack at the monastery at Kikos, and people would come in and they were the weirdest color garment. And the reason they were a strange color is because you weren't going to leave with that weird color. You weren't going to say, hey, I upgraded my outfit and I'm going to go. So everybody came in with these oddly strange blue aqua robes. And you saw somebody walk in, you're like, yeah, they came in improperly dressed. There's no way they were going to take that with them. And then it would go back on the rack. But they were clothed as they came in. They were given that, the proper attire as they came in. This gospel reading speaks about that proper attire being given to us. Now, if it's given to this man, why doesn't he have it on? And the reason for that is he chose not to wear it. So the fathers of the church remind us about this gospel reading, and they say there's a couple things. First, are you choosing to even go? And what does that mean? Are we choosing to follow the words of God, or are we choosing to do our own thing? To make excuses, to say, well, I'm really busy. I have to put time into my business. I have to do all these other things. And St. John Chrysostom says that our thirst as human beings is for the material, right? And we thirst and we say, I really want to, say get a new automobile. And all you're thinking about is a new automobile. Where's the sale? Where am I going to get it? What's going to be the best thing? And then you get that automobile, you drive it for a little bit, and then it fades away rather quick in your list of priorities. You got it, it's over. And St. John Chrysostom says that. We satiate ourselves with the world, and that satiation decreases almost immediately afterwards when the buildup was so great. The buildup of saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, and then you do it, and then it's gone, right? He says, too, St. John Chrysostom, that the reverse happens for our spiritual lives. We don't have that great thirst for our spiritual growth until we start to receive it. Until we put ourselves out there and in the presence of God and try to grow spiritually, then we receive those gifts, and then we say, this is something that continues to grow. So it's the reverse. As everything in our lives, it's always the reverse, right? We know about the paradoxes in the Orthodox Church and as far as in Christianity. But he says that once we're there and we receive, then we have this great desire to continue to receive and to continue to grow. Which takes us back to this man. Why didn't he wear this garment? Because he didn't want to. He didn't want to be clothed with this garment. He had, as the fathers of the church say, the self-righteous and self-willed disposition, even in the kingdom of God. That's why he's bound up and he's sent out. Because if he comes there and says, I'm not going to wear this, he's already spoken by saying, I'm not going to put on the armor of God. I'm not going to put on this grace of God. I'm good enough. I don't need God to overshadow anything I've done in my life. And that self-righteousness got him expelled from the kingdom of heaven in this parable. So as we look at our lives and as we look at what the kingdom of heaven means to us, and as we look at how we're supposed to approach God, we need to think about our disposition. Are we saying no because we're busy? Or are we saying no because we just don't care? Or are we saying no because it's just whatever? And I think people think that about the church many times, and they say, well, I don't need to go to church. I pray on my own. I do my own thing. I have my own way of life. I do my own sort of thing, which is the same exact disposition of the man who is in the kingdom of heaven who refuses to put on this garment. What I tell people when they say, I don't want to go to church and I don't think church is necessary and I pray on my own, I have my own way with God, I have my own, me and God have our own thing going on. I say, well, if that was the case, then why did Christ come and die to establish the church? Why did the saints that are on the walls die to establish the church facility, the church liturgy? Why did St. Athanasius, our patron saint, fight against Arian, who was trying to destroy the church? Why didn't we just let it go and say, whatever, who cares? We don't need these churches. We don't need anything. Let's go do our own thing. Let's go out to our favorite tree, sit down, look up at the leaves, and start connecting with God as some nature, tree hugger, Christian, whatever mentality it is, right? The tree huggers, right? I hope there's no tree. Well, if you're a tree hugger, it's too late now, right? You already got. So, but the point is, the church is that ark of salvation. It is the point where we come forward to God to cover ourselves and cover our sinfulness. And realizing that we're sinful is also another thing, too, that many times people fail to see, and especially in some other denominations, we see that they say, well, you know, I'm done. I'm saved. I'm good. I'm there. And I said, well, how do you know you're not doing something wrong? How do you know? Maybe there's something that you know, unless you're the most brilliant person in the world and you're the most enlightened and holy person in the world, how do you know that you're not doing something that's wrong? Now, for anyone who's ever grown up, right? I think everybody's gone through some phase of life where you've aged, right? You realize that you were probably doing something, in some aspect of life, unless, of course, you're totally deluded, that you thought you were doing right, that somebody said, no, you're doing that wrong. Whether it was your job, whether it was home, whether it was habits at eating at the dinner table, or whether it was something you said, whether it was a particular phrase. I mean, I've heard that too. People say, you know, with limited experience in the Greek language, we use a phrase, and then you hear it and you're like, wait a second, don't use that, don't say that. And they're like, why? I heard my uncle used to say that. That's not a good phrase to use. I mean, that's like potty mouth. So keep it. And they're like, no, I thought it was good. I won't do it anymore. But people get corrected. They get changed. And we all are up for change and for correction. Unless, of course, we're self-righteous and we say, everything I do is perfect. Everything I do is right. I'm not in need of correction. I'm not going to wear that bridal garment. I'm not going to put on Christ. So as you look at your life, realize that everything that Christ did, he did for a reason. And everything that he says for a reason. But don't make excuses to say that you're too busy. No one is too busy. In fact, I told someone the other day who was saying, you know, I was talking to them about coming to church, and they said, so Father, you know, on Sundays I'm just so busy. I got work and I got all these things. And I said, who do you think the busiest person in the world is? And I said, what do you think about, you know, the President of the United States? What do you think? You think he's pretty busy? Yeah, he's pretty busy, right? Everybody says, you know, he's here, he's there, he's doing all these things. He doesn't really turn off his job, right? I said, do you know what the President of the United States will stop for? No matter where, if he's meeting with Putin, if he's meeting with whoever, it doesn't matter who he's meeting with. He's going to stop for one thing. And do you know what that one thing is? To use a washroom. No matter where he's at, when he has to go, he's got to stop whatever he's doing. So the priority is there. The need is there. It's just about prioritizing the church and saying, is this a need for me? Is this something that if I don't do it, my heart, my brain, my life is going to explode? I'm going to die from not coming and speaking to God. No matter where we're at, we're never too busy. There is not such a thing as being too busy for God. Because when we are in need, when we're laying down on a cot and we're staring at the fluorescent lights, wondering if it's benign or if it's malignant, or if this needs to be repaired, or if it's something that can be worked out through therapy. When we're looking there and we call out to God and say, God, help me. What if he said, I'm really busy? What will we think about that? So you're never too busy. And remember this gospel reading today, it's a choice. It's a choice to accept the invitation of God, or it's a choice to say, you know what, I have other things. I have my business, I have my farm, I just got married, or I got to do this, I got sheep, cattle, I got to play games, I have to cut the grass, I got to go to a game. Whatever the excuses are in modern day times, we have to realize that we have to come to the point of accepting God's invitation and let Him cover us with His grace. And never to say that I've done enough, I'm good enough, because when we say that, we're at the very, very bottom. When you think you're self-righteous, and you've probably encountered people like that too, that say, you know, I got everything going on, my life is just perfect, and I'm this and that, and all these things, and you listen to it, and you're just like, you know, you just want to throw up, right? And you're like, how do they live with themselves talking like that? I mean, do they just talk in the mirror and speak about how great they are? And you see that, and you say, I don't want to be around that. What does God see when He sees us? Really sees us. Despite whatever we think we can do or not do or whatever, when He looks at us, He probably just goes, oh man, you need so much work, right? To all of us. So come forward, let God's grace come upon you. Never be to the point of thinking that you're perfect. Always look and accept God's invitations, whatever those are, to help, to pray, to do good things for others, to be kind, to follow the 10 Commandments. Start from the basics and let God continue to send you that invitation, for you to grab the invitation and to not walk, to not delay, to not get sidetracked, but to run to God, to be in His heavenly banquet. Amen.